Mr. and Mrs. Rotimi Alabi lived in the bustling city of Ibadan. Their home was in a quiet neighborhood, away from the noise of the busy city center. But even though they had a very comfortable life, there was something that had been weighing heavily on their hearts for years. They had no children. Rotimi was a man with calm demeanor. He worked as a school teacher at a local secondary school. His wife Olufumilayo was an accountant. They both loved each other deeply, but every time they went to visit relatives or friends who had children, the emptiness in their hearts grew. They had tried for years to conceive, but nothing worked. The dream of having a child seemed distant, almost like a far-off star in the sky. Their journey to become parents had been filled with visits to the doctors, prayers, and countless hopeful days. There was moments when they thought it was finally happening, only for disappointment to knock again. Olufumilayo would often cry silently at night, her tears soaking her pillow, while her husband Rotimi would stay awake, holding her hand, trying to comfort her in ways words could not. The couple had sought help from various doctors, some traditional and others modern, but each time the results were the same. There was no clear reason for their difficulty. The doctors were kind, but their words never seemed to lift the weight of despair that hung in the Alabis' home. Sometimes, Fumi felt like an outsider in her own life. A woman was supposed to be a mother, but was not. And the years passed. The pressure from Rotimi's family grew worse. When will you give us a child? They would ask, as though there was a secret they weren't sharing. But through it all, they never gave up on each other. Every hardship, every failed attempt to have a baby only brought them closer. They supported one another in silence, in the quiet corner of their home, where no one could see their pain. They knew that no matter what, they had each other. One evening, after a long day of work, Rotimi came home to find Olufumi sitting quietly in the living room, looking out of the window. "Fumi, are you okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. She didn't answer right away, but then, in a small voice, she spoke. "Rotimi, what if we never have a child? What if it's just us forever?" Her voice trembled with a mixture of sadness and fear. Rotimi took her hands and squeezed it. "If it's just us, then it's just us. I have you, and you have me. That's all that matters." But deep down, both of them knew it wasn't that simple. Their hearts longed for a child, a little one to call their own. They prayed together every night, asking for a miracle. They went to church. They fasted, doing everything they could do to stay hopeful. One day, after yet another failed attempt, Olufumilayo was sitting in their small kitchen. Her head was resting on her cabinet. She was tired, not just from the physical exhaustion, but from the emotional weight of everything. She had just gotten the news from the hospital that she wasn't pregnant again. The tears were threatening to fall, but she fought them back. Just then, Rotimi walked in with a smile on his face, holding something in his hands. "I have something for you," he said, his voice excited. Olufimilayo looked up, surprised by his sudden cheerfulness. He handed her a small wrapped box. It was simple, just a little box tied with a pieces of strings. She opened it slowly, unsure of what to expect. Inside, there was a small silver chain in the shape of a mother and a child. And it wasn't large, it wasn't an expensive gift, but in that moment, it meant more to her than anything else. Rotimi had thought of her. He had thought of their dream, even though if it had not come true yet. "Maybe this would remind you that you would get there," he said gently. "Not today, not tomorrow, but certainly someday we would be parents." Olufumilayo took a deep breath and smiled. She hadn't expected him to buy her a gift, especially not in the midst of all their struggles. But it made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope was all she felt. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Olufumilayo started feeling different. She couldn't explain it at first, but she felt something inside her that she didn't feel before. She was more tired than usual. At first, she ignored it, telling herself that it was just stress or perhaps the flu. But when her period didn't come, she knew something was off. One morning, she woke up early and quietly slipped out of bed. Carefully not to wake Rotimi, she went to the bathroom and found the pregnancy test in the drawer. She had done it so many times before, but each time it had been negative. She didn't want to get her hopes up, but this time was different. She took the test and waited, her heart pounding in her chest. When the result appeared on the little screen, her hands shook. It was positive. Her mind raced. Could it really be true? She rushed to the bedroom, her breath catching in her throat. Rotimi was still asleep, his deep breathing filling the quiet room. She couldn't wait any longer. She shook him gently. Rotimi, wake up! She whispered louder. Wake up! I have something to tell you. Rotimi opened his eyes slowly, still half asleep. What is it, Fumilayo? She didn't say a word. She simply held out the pregnancy test, and when he saw the two lines, his face lit up with brightest smile ever. It was as though all the years of waiting, the pain, the longing were finally coming to an end. For a moment, they stared just right at each other, not knowing what to say. There was no words that could capture the joy and disbelief they both felt. They had dreamt of this day for so long, but now that it was real, they could hardly believe it. Tears filled Olufumi's eyes as she hugged Rotimi. They both held each other tightly, knowing that their lives were about to change forever. But as they embraced, neither of them knew what was going to come next. They had been through so much to get here. Their child, the one they had waited for so long, was coming into a world that was still full of challenges. Months passed, and the joy of having their long-awaited child finally filled the Alabi's household. The nursery was decorated, and the air was already filled with the scent of fresh baby powder and warm milk. Olufumilayo and Rotimi were in a constant state of wonder, as they couldn't believe that the baby they had dreamt of for so many years was finally in their arms. Teniola was everything to them. She was their miracle. She was their blessing. From the moment she was born, Teniola was showered with love and attention. She was the apple of her parents' eyes, and every milestone, every smile, every laughter, every rollover was celebrated with joy. But as the months went on, they began to fall into a routine. Olufumilayo would buy the most expensive fruits and the finest fish, all in the hope that Teniola would grow stronger, heavier, and faster than other children. Rotimi too believed that the more they fed Teniola, the stronger she would become. They read books, consulted with family, and took advice from neighbors, always looking for ways to ensure their daughter's well-being. They even consulted with local herbalists who provided a series of concoctions that promised to make their daughter immune to sicknesses and extra strong. From a very early age, Teniola was overfed. Her every need was met before she could even voice a complaint. She was given rich, fatty meals, sweets, and treats whenever she showed the slightest interest. They believed that a child who ate well would grow up to be healthy and strong adults. Rotimi often joked that Teniola would be the strongest girl in the city of Ibadan, and Olufumi would smile proudly at her husband's words. But as Teniola grew older, things didn't quite turn out as they had imagined. At first, Teniola was a chubby baby with round cheeks and thick thighs, and everyone around her marveled at how adorable she was. Neighbors would often stop by just to see her, exclaiming over her size, her strength, her energy. This girl is a real powerhouse, they would say as they patted her on her back and praised Olufunmilayo and Rotimi for their good parenting. But as Teniola reached her toddler years, the consequences of her overfeeding started to show. She was a bit heavier than other children her age, which at first didn't raise any alarm. She was happy, full of energy, loved to run around the house, play with her toys. But by the time she was 4, it became clear that Teniola wasn't as active as her peers. She would tire quickly, out of breath, after only a short run, and her little legs seemed too heavy to carry her for long distances. At first, Rotimi Olufunmilayo chalked it up to her being extra strong and growing at her own pace. But as Teniola entered school, the differences between her and the other children began to stand out more clearly. She was slower. Her classmates would often finish their games or activities more faster than she did. When they went for a physical activity such as running or playing soccer, Teniola found herself gasping for air long before others did. Her classmates didn't notice at first, but as time passed, some of the kids began to call her names like Big Tenny. Her parents, however, continued to praise her, telling her that she was stronger than anyone else. As Teniola grew older, her weight continued to be a source of tension. She found it harder to keep up with her friends, and teasing from her peers grew more frequent. One day, when she was about 7, she overheard a conversation between two other children in her class. "Why does Teniola look so big?" one of the children asked. "He doesn't even look like the rest of us." Teniola's heart sunk. She didn't respond, but that evening, as she lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Her parents always told her she was special and that she was stronger and healthier than other kids. But the truth was, she didn't feel that way. She felt heavy, tired and different. At home, Olufunmilayo and Rotimi remained proud of their daughter. They continued to feed her the same rich meals, believing they were giving her what was best. "Eat my money, my child," Rotimi would often say. "If you don't, who will?" he said, smiling proudly. They didn't see the subtle sign of discomfort that Teniola was trying to hide. They didn't notice how she was often too tired to play or how she began to withdraw from activities she once enjoyed. One afternoon, Rotimi took Teniola to the park, a place they had once loved to visit together. He wanted to see her run, to watch her jump with joy, to show the world how strong and healthy his daughter was. But when Teniola tried to join the other children in a game of tag, she quickly became exhausted. She sat down on the grass, her chest heaving, watching as the other children continued to play without her. "Tenny, are you okay?" Rotimi asked. "I am tired, Daddy," Teniola whispered. "I don't want to play anymore." For the first time, Rotimi and Olufunmilayo began to question their decision. They had always thought that the more they fed Teniola, the stronger she was becoming. They hadn't realized that they had been feeding her too much, giving her more than her body could handle. It wasn't strength they were building, it was exhaustion and discomfort. When Teniola turned 9, she began to refuse the food she had once eagerly devoured. She felt overwhelmed by the constant pressure to eat, to grow, to be stronger. Her parents had always praised her for finishing her meals, and now that she didn't want to eat as much as they did, they grew worried. "Why are you not eating, Tenny?" Olufunmilayo asked one evening as Teniola sat at the table, pushing her food around her plate. "I am not hungry, mommy," she said softly, avoiding her mother's eyes. "You have to eat, Teniola. You need to stay strong. You need to grow. Your body is special and you can't let anyone stop you from being healthy." Olufunmilayo replied, her voice filled with concern. But Teniola wasn't sure if she wanted to be special anymore. By the time Teniola reached her teenage years, she had developed a complicated relationship with food and her body. She was still larger than her peers, but her energy was low and her self-esteem was fragile. She didn't feel healthy, though her parents still believed they were doing the right thing by feeding her rich food and herbal concoctions. But deep down, Teniola knew something had to change. She had spent so many years being told she was stronger and healthier than others, but the reality of her body was much more complicated than that. She had learned that sometimes the things we think are best for us can actually do more harm than good. And as the years went on, Teniola realized she needed to find a way to take control and finally listen to her own voice. The pressure of living up to the expectation set by her parents, especially her mother, was starting to feel unbearable. Olufunmilayo and Rotimi had always treated her as if her weight was a mark of her strength and health. But Teniola was beginning to see that their beliefs were rooted in love and was doing more harm than good to her. She felt trapped, as if the love they showed her was tied to something that made her unhappy. Teniola began to resolve to have a conversation with her parents. Teniola began to resolve to have a conversation with her parents. She needed to tell them the truth, that she didn't like the way her body had grown. She didn't want to keep pretending that everything was fine when inside she felt like she was falling apart. She had to speak up for herself, for her own sake. She had to let them know that she didn't want to be the strongest or the healthiest anymore. She wanted to feel comfortable in her own skin. She wanted to feel very normal. For days, she rehearsed what she would say. How could she tell her mother, who had spent so many years feeding her with love and care? How could she tell her father, who was so proud of her and always makes jokes about her strength? Would they understand? Would they still love her if she told them the truth? She decided that the conversation would happen that evening. Olufunmilayo and Rotimi had already planned to take her out for a celebratory dinner for her graduation from secondary school, for her achievements. But before that, she would tell them she couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. But just as Teniola was about to sit down and gather the courage to speak, something unexpected happened. It was early in the afternoon. Teniola had been feeling a little dizzy throughout the day, but she brushed it off, attributing it to her usual tiredness. Her legs felt weak, and she struggled to walk up the stairs to her room. When she reached her door, she felt a strange sensation in her chest, like a tightening that wouldn't go away. She leaned against the wall for support, breathing heavily. It was as if her whole body had suddenly turned against her. She tried to steady herself, but the room began to spin. Her head swam, her vision blurred, and her heart raced. She reached for the door, but before she could touch the handle, her knees buckled beneath her, and she collapsed on the floor. Teniola's mind raced. She tried to call out for help to her parents, but her voice was weak, barely audible. The pain in her chest seemed to grow, and she couldn't breathe properly. She felt her body failing her in that moment. All the years of overfeeding, all the warnings she had ignored suddenly came crashing down on her. For what felt like an eternity, she lay on the floor, unable to move, trapped in her own body, her heart pounding in her chest, and her thoughts became jumbled. Her parents' voices echoed in her mind, reminding her of their hopes and dreams for her. But in that moment, all she could think of was she didn't want to die. It wasn't long before Olufumilayo heard the sound of Teniola's faint cries. She rushed up the stairs, her heart racing. When she opened the door to Teniola's room, she gasped at the sight of her daughters lying on the floor, pale and struggling to breathe. Teniola! She cried, rushing to her daughter's side. What is happening? Oh my God! Rotimi, who had been in the living room downstairs, rushed up the stairs at the sound of his wife's voice. When he saw Teniola on the floor, panic spread across his face. What happened? He demanded, kneeling beside her. I don't know, Olufumilayo said, her voice shaking. She was fine just a moment ago. Teniola, speak to me. Can you hear me? Teniola struggled to open her eyes, but when she did, her mother's face was blurry in her vision. She tried to speak, to tell her parents everything, but words wouldn't come out. Instead, she gasped for air, clutching her chest as the pain intensified. Help her! We need to get to the hospital right now, Rotimi shouted, his calm demeanor replaced by panic. Olufumilayo quickly grabbed her phone, dialing for an ambulance. In the frantic moment that followed, Rotimi carefully scooped Teniola into his arms and carried her out of the room, her head resting against his chest. He felt a weight he had never known before, a weight heavier than anything he had carried in his life. His daughter, his pride and joy, was hurting, and he couldn't protect her. He couldn't save her from the consequences of years of misguided care. As they rushed down the stairs, Teniola's vision faded in and out. Her mind drifted between the pain she was feeling and the thought that she had been building up inside her. It wasn't just this physical exhaustion, it was the weight of her parents' love, their expectations, their beliefs that she was always going to be strong and perfect, even when she was breaking inside. She thought of the conversation she had been preparing for, the truth she had been too afraid to speak. Would she ever be able to tell them now? Would she ever be able to tell them that all these years of overfeeding, of being pushed to be the strongest, had led her to these moments? As the ambulance sped towards the hospital, Teniola felt a mixture of fear and relief. For the first time, she had to confront the consequences of all her overfeeding. She had no choice now but to confront the truth. Maybe, just maybe, her parents would finally see it too. Teniola's vision was still hazy when they arrived at the hospital. The nurses quickly took her from Rotimi's arms and rushed her into the emergency room, leaving her parents standing in confusion and fear. Rotimi and Olufumilayo sat together in the waiting room, their hands tightly gripping each other. Time seemed to stretch and contract, moments turning into hours. Olufumilayo's face was wet with tears, her eyes red from the strain of worrying about her only child. Rotimi's jaw was clenched, and though he tried to remain composed, his worry was obvious in a way that he tapped his foot impatiently on the floor. It felt like an eternity before the doctor appeared in the doorway, his face unreadable. Mr. and Mrs. Alabi Rotimi, the doctor asked, his tone serious. Are you the parents of Teniola? Yes, we are, Olufumilayo replied, her voice trembling. The doctor motioned for them to follow him to a quiet corner. Your daughter's condition is serious, he began. She's currently suffering from severe complication due to being overweight. Specifically, her body has developed an increased strain on her heart and lungs. Teniola is experiencing respiratory distress, and there are signs of early hypertension, all linked to the excess weight. Olufumi's breath caught in her throat, But we've always fed her the best food. We've always tried to make her strong, she said with shock in her voice. The doctor nodded sympathetically but continued. I understand that you wanted the best for her, but sometimes more isn't always better. Overfeeding, especially food high in fat and sugar, can lead to obesity and a host of other health issues. In Teniola's case, it's caused by physical strain on her heart, which is why she collapsed. Rotimi's heart sank as the weight of the words hit him. He had always thought that feeding Teniola well, giving her more than enough, was the right thing to do. He never realized they had been doing more harm than good. She is stable now, the doctor continued, but she needs to make significant changes to her diet and lifestyle moving forward. Regular exercises, a balanced diet, and medical monitoring will be crucial for her long-term health. I would also recommend seeing a nutritionist. Rotimi and Olufunmilayo sat in stunned silence as the doctor left, leaving them with the painful truth they had spent years avoiding. Their well-meaning attempt to make their daughter strong had unknowingly led her to this point, and now they were faced with the difficult task of helping her recover, not just physically, but emotionally as well. After Teniola was moved to the recovery room, her parents sat at her bedside, her heart heavy with guilt. She lay still, her chest rising and falling slowly as the machine monitored her vitals. It was clear that she was still weak from the collapse, but there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes when she saw her parents. Mom, Dad, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Olufunmilayo took her daughter's hands gently. Teniola, we are sorry. We should have seen the signs. We shouldn't have kept feeding you so much. We didn't realize what we were doing to you, she said, her voice filled with regret. Rotimi nodded, his eyes full of tears. We wanted you to be strong, Tenny. We wanted to protect you, to make sure you had everything you needed. But we were wrong. We didn't know how much harm we were causing. Please forgive us. Eniola looked up at her parents, her face pale but soft with understanding. I know, mommy and daddy, she whispered, her voice shaky. I didn't want to disappoint you, but I didn't feel strong. I felt tired all the time. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. Her words cut through their hearts, but it was a moment of clarity. They had been so focused on feeding her love through food, they didn't stop to listen to her, to understand the pain she was going through. And now it was time for the change. I don't want to be like this anymore, Teniola continued, her eyes filled with determination. I want to be healthy. I want to feel good. I want to run and play like the other kids. I don't want to be the strongest or the biggest. I just want to be healthy. Lufumilayo's tears fell freely now as she nodded. We will do whatever it takes. Teniola, we promise you, we will make sure you get healthy and we will support you every step of the way. In the weeks following, Teniola's life began to change. Her parents were resolute. They found a nutritionist who created a balanced meal plan tailored to Teniola's need. They replaced the sugary snacks with fruits and vegetables, and the rich fatty dishes with lean protein and whole grains. They also introduced regular exercises in their routine, starting with simple walks and gradually increasing the intensity. Olufunmilayo and Rotimi joined Teniola in her efforts. They worked together in the evening and they made sure to prepare healthy home-cooked meals as family. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes the craving for old comforts were strong, but they stuck to their commitment. Over time, Teniola began to feel the changes. She felt more energetic, more confident. Her body was no longer weighed down by excess. And while the changes weren't always immediate, they started to show. Teniola could walk longer distance without feeling out of breath. She could play with her friends and participate in gym class without feeling like the odd one out. The relationship between Teniola and her parents deepened. They no longer tied their love for her to size or strength. They loved her for who she was. And Teniola finally felt free from the burden of expectation that had weighed on her for so long. Thank you for watching this story. I hope you have learned some valuable lessons from this story. You can share with us the lessons you have learned in the comment section. Like this video please and subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed. Please kindly share this video to your loved ones. Until I come your way again with another African story, for now, from me, it is bye.